They'll watch TV and say, oh, that's what their understanding of reality is. The Rajapaksa regime is never going to let TV into the Northeast. Never. And that's why we have to have a little more creativity in selling our program here. Now, the other thing that we're trying to do in order to increase the number of affidavits we've got, first-hand retelling of the atrocities, is perhaps to get into the Tamil Nadu refugee camps, those who have most recently fled the island, whose memories would be fresh and could tell us firsthand in an affidavit, this is what happened to us, and gather 1,000 of them and use them for the grand jury and stimulating the kind of political support we need to then to go to the trial phase. This enterprise is not going to be short. I think it's foolish to try to be either too optimistic or too pessimistic. There's no doubt we have some signs that are auspicious. Sri Lanka was ejected from the Human Rights Council in April of last year because of the atrocious human rights record, and 3 former Nobel Prize winners, Jimmy Carter, Desmond Tutu, and Perez Escoval, wrote letters denouncing the Sri Lankan government. There have been some movement in the United States Congress, the Leahy Amendment that cuts off at least military or non-humanitarian aid to Sri Lanka. It's certainly not going to qualify under the Millennium Grant Corporation funds. And there's some movement in, I think, the British Parliament that tries to call attention to the devastation and the genocide. So there's something to work with. It's not as bad. I mean, the ones that are really hopeless are like the Uyghurs in China, the Tibetans. No one's going to offend China because they have too many economic tentacles out there. But Sri Lanka isn't that important that you couldn't get a country to say, I don't care what the Rajapakses think. Now, the other element that requires a little bit of skill, and it could be flukish, is we need to look for cracks in the Sinhalese Buddhist monolith there. Like every political organization, there are always people who are there they're power hungry, and they'll break, and they will try to exploit a weakness in the current government because they want to take over. And that's certainly true with regard to the Rajapakses. They undoubtedly have political enemies, whether it's the UNP or otherwise. And to the extent that we can peel off and find common ground for the genocide indictment and prosecution with Sinhalese, especially Sinhalese Buddhists, it helps us, because then optically it looks like it isn't just Tamil against Sinhalese Buddhists, which can be discounted as just old warfare between ethnic groups. But if the Sinhalese Buddhists, some of them come aboard, then it looks like, my gosh, these people must really be terrible. They're just slaughtering everybody. And something of that sort came about with the assassination that he mentioned at the outset of the Sunday Leader editor, who had written his own obituary before he was slaughtered, saying these people are power hungry. He knows they're coming for him because he criticizes them, and this is a government whose mentality is, if you're not with us, we will destroy you, because they can't handle criticism. They know philosophically their power is so illegitimate, they're frightened to death that anyone will stand up and say, you know what? You're not a tyrant that's going to succeed here. And then the only thing they know how to respond with is death, threats, and things of that sort. That's what, say, in some sense, is their sign of weakness. Because if all a government knows how to handle dissent and criticism is through brute force, you know it relies totally on terror. And as soon as that fear lifts, they're done. They're done. That's what happened in Romania under Ceausescu. That's why the Chinese communists also are fearful of letting 80-year-old ladies demonstrate at Beijing. You know, they have a stick and they won't let them because they're so fearful. That's the mentality of the current government in Sri Lanka. They know they have no legitimacy. They know it. Now we have to work on that and maybe find common elements amongst those who are also being oppressed, even though they're not Tamils. Well, that concludes my presentation here. I'm eager to entertain your questions, but I will come back again to, I think, in some sense, the most important point about what this enterprise is all about. You know, we all, in our lives, we struggle for meaning. You know, why are we here? What is it that we can do that's more than just subsistence? It doesn't mean necessarily leaving footprints in the sand of time, but do something that immortalizes yourself, because it'll appeal to a principle that lives for the ages, that will excite someone 1,000 years from now. Say, yeah, that person stood up for what was right and what was just, and get inspired by that. I make this observation because in my own upbringing, the first person that I was inspired by was Socrates. He took the hemlock, he took death over the idea that he would renounce an inquiry into the moral rightness of human behavior and action, stop teaching youth. And said, wow, he's inspiring me. He died 4,000 years ago. That's what we have to think about too. Those yet to be born. How do we immortalize our lives? Not by doing things foolish, but by knowing there's certain times, certain principles that have to be defended, or else we reduce ourselves from civilized people into the Pleistocene age, and that's not what we want to be about. Thank you.